This is the High Desert Luthiery podcast with Luthier Fox Fletcher of Mallory Guitars.
The most sound advice I got was build what you really love and what you would play. And then the challenge is to find people who agree with you to buy your guitars. And I haven't, strayed from that. I don't want to build something I wouldn't play. I don't want to build something that aesthetically isn't me, because that's just like playing music that you don't like, or painting in a style you don't like, or any kind of art. At the end of the day, again, it's art. If it's not making you happy, then you're doing something wrong, and you're making art, and it should bring joy to you and others, and it shouldn't be a stress, and it shouldn't be wasted effort, you know.
Welcome to the High Desert Luthiery podcast. I'm Perry from Monkey Guitars and the creator of the High Desert Luthiery Invitational, or as we're calling it now, the HDLI. This show will happen twice a year and is a celebration of luthiers, luthier-adjacent creators, musicians, and the art that comes from combining all these things. The HDLI is a unique event that encourages actual support in the music community by providing free booths to the vendors and free admission to the public. The event includes vendors and musicians that are curated by me to create a cohesive, organized event. The HDLI encourages community and collaboration amongst the artists. This podcast is one way to help us get to know one another. To learn more about the show, please visit the website highdesertluthery.com. Joining me is Fox Fletcher of Mallory Guitars. How you doing, Fox?
So far, so good.
All right. I apologize for not checking in with you this morning.
Oh, it's all right. I didn't check in with you either.
I was in the zone listening to Bigfoot stories.
Cool. Sounds like a good Sunday morning. I was zoned out myself this morning. I was reading a music biography and drinking coffee, and then my wife said, "What time is your interview?" I said 10 o'clock. She said, "We need to get going."
What biography?
I was reading Mark Lanigan's Sing Backwards and Weep.
Oh, I have no idea. Who is that?
Mark Lanigan, he was a singer for the Screaming Trees.
Wow, I have no idea. Who are the Screaming Trees?
They're a Seattle band, late 80s, early 90s, part of the grunge scene.
Right on.
Yeah.
It's interesting how many bands came out of that scene.
Incredible amount, yeah.
And then the greater area. Like people don't realize Alice in Chains were from sort of outside of that area, more inland.
Yeah, everyone got lumped in with Seattle itself, but
it's pretty wild how an area can really shape a sound. And not to say that all those bands sounded the same, because they certainly did not.
Yeah, definitely not.
But there seems to be some sort of characteristic sound of the era in the area. Because like Guns N' Roses were happening in LA, and I mean, they really don't sound the same.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything happening in LA was drastically different at that same time. And it's just so wild how a scene can, shape a sound. Or even on the other hand, people will flock to an area to be a part of a scene and really help build a sound, like Nashville, for instance. And so now we'll continue with the interrogation. You know what? Let's start here. Your design. I want to know what inspired this design and what influences did you have going into making this design, and also your logo, along with, your introduction.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Perry. I really appreciate it. This is an awesome opportunity. The High Desert show from last year was awesome, and really impressive how you put everything together. Seemed to run seamlessly, and having attended, I really liked the group of folks you got to participate. I met a lot of really neat people and had some great conversations, and it was inspiring. So thanks for doing this.
Having you attend the show really meant a lot to a lot of people, and I thank you for showing up. I'm very grateful for that. In that, the wave of happiness that I experienced from a few of the other builders, the excitement, it was like, all right, cool. This is great.
Yeah.
So, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Okay. Well, I guess your first question was the inspiration for my design or the guitars themselves, and several factors. I'm an electric guitar guy through and through. I've had lots of experience with acoustic guitars, but I am wholeheartedly an electric guitar guy. I'm a rock and roll metal head all my days, and so you can't get any more rock and metal than solid body electric guitars. And from the moment I started playing guitar, 30 years ago now, I wanted to build guitars. I've always liked Les Paul style guitars, juniors, carved tops, and started off with my version of that. Just sat down, started drawing. It's got a kind of a mid-century aesthetic to it. My wife and I have a lot of mid-century furniture and aesthetic to our home, so I kind of like that aspect of it. A lot of the construction and attention to detail, cosmetics, all was influenced by working at Collings for 5 years. You work at Collings for any amount of time, you get what I call Collings eyes, and you're unable to see anything again without noticing little details and flaws or how things are made really well or not well. And I've taken all of that into consideration in my inspiration for how I construct and design.
I find it very exciting to meet more builders that have had production experience. And you're absolutely right. The muscles that you build in QC and how tight or loose those QC requirements are can really shape you. I notice in production experience luthiers, there's this great sense of urgency as well as high attention to details. And, I have a similar background and I feel like for a long time it got in my way, but that's neither here nor there. But it does affect like the final product and the overall feel. So, for those that don't know, Collings was predominantly an acoustic guitar company, and then I'd say fairly recently,
Sometime prior to 2010, probably 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there, they started making electrics.
yeah, and I remember seeing them at the NAMM show, Gibson style, right?
Yeah, they started with that. They do semi-hollow body things and jazz archtop style electrics as well, and offsets to hit the Fender market kind of thing as well.
Oh,
In the course of time I was there, they introduced quite a few new models.
I remember their electrics that first year they rolled them out at the NAMM show. I was just like, wow, these look good, they feel good. And the Collings crew was always very inviting to my crew, Santa Cruz Guitar Shop crew. We had some visits from some of the Collings staff, and it was really nice, to get to meet other builders and stuff. And we had a few Collings employees come work for us for a while I was there as well. And it's neat to see how they adapt to, the SCGC setting at the time, which, I haven't been to the shop in many years, and I'm sure it's quite different. It's always wild to see how a shop can change over a few months and then over a few years. I always had a lot of respect for Collings. How did your time there influence the work that you're doing now?
I think more than anything, a keen sense of attention to detail. Nothing leaves that shop. It gets put in a box and sent off to wherever without it being as perfect as it can be. So that's the way I tend to my builds as well as my repairs. The minutia that's involved in making sure everything's perfect. You aim to impress with every single piece, and then the setup aspect of that. I was at the end of the line. I was the electric final assembly setup and test play guy. So after setting up over 3,000 Collings in my time there, the setup, the skills, the physics involved, what makes a setup good. So many things that I didn't know prior to going there, I added to my skill set tenfold by doing that on repeat for 5 years.
Let's get into that because everything that we do is so oh, I lost the word. It's so subjective, to everyone's individual experience. And I can tell you
Absolutely.
from my experience as a player, I'll play something with low action as easily as I'll play something with like extremely high action. And I just kind of work with what I have. Let's just say my understanding of a setup and the way that I teach it is it's individual to each player. Can you share your thoughts about what goes into a quote unquote good setup and what you shoot for as far as feel with guitars coming out of your shop?
Well, you said it yourself. A setup is subjective. I work with my clients who bring guitars in for setup, looking for what they want. I have them play. I ask them what they're after, what they don't like. And a lot of them just say, just do whatever you do. And a lot of times they like it. I kind of hit the middle of the road there on what I consider to be a spec setup. And then when they come in to pick up their guitar, we sit down with it and adjust it one way or the other. If they need anything adjusted until we dial it in. Oftentimes I'll send people home with their guitar and say, put it through its paces. If there's anything that it needs, bring it back. We'll keep dialing it in until it's what you need it to be. I set up all my Mallorys with 11s, standard tuning 11s. I think that's what they really like. But if someone wants 9s or 10s, that's totally cool. We're going to make it what you want. I know some people are steadfast in their belief that, a guitar has to be set up this way and it has to have these strings, and that's all baloney. It's all subjective. It's art. It's all art at the end of the day, and whatever an artist needs to make that art and have fun with it, that's the goal.
I really appreciate you saying all of that. I share the exact same philosophy. It's so nice to hear somebody say that, over time, like all you're hearing is your own voice, and your own ideas, and you kind of figure out what works for you in your shop. I have the warm and fuzzies right now. Like, oh, right, very like-minded builder. Fox is very warm person, very inviting person. Your little shop, your design, you could see the paint on the wall. I love the vibe of it. It's very professional,
Thank you.
and I love how inviting you are. The other thing that I really love is your logo.
Oh,
So,
thanks.
what came first, the guitars or the logo?
The guitars came first. Originally, it was going to be Fletcher guitars because that's my last name, but turns out there's several Fletcher guitars already. There's several Fox guitars. So I looked to my favorite grandparent, my grandpa Mallory, who owned a hardware store, and he was kind of a Renaissance man. He had his fingers into everything, and he was a really interesting guy. When he passed on, I inherited a lot of his tools. Nothing major, no major machines or anything, but little things that I use in my builds. And he's the grandparent I spent more time with than any of my grandparents. And we had a great rapport with one another and a lot of good memories, and wanted to involve my family somehow in the name. And that was an easy pick for me after my first and last name. I thought, well, we'll go to my mom's side of the family. And so that's how the name came to be. And then as far as the logo, a buddy of mine in San Francisco draws several things out for me, and he's a great graphic designer. And then I had a guy who works on film and TV in Albuquerque here, and he drew up about a dozen designs, and we laid them all out and kind of looked at them. And between both sets of designs, my wife and I zeroed in on the one that you see today. It just seemed to be perfect.
I love how these things happen and the story to go along with it. And for me, every time I look at the logo or I see you, I'll be reminded of that. And I love it when builders will share these stories on their website. I feel like it gives us a better understanding of who you are and, helps build know, like, and trust ability. And so thank you for sharing that. Can you talk about the guitar design, the name of it, how you came up with the name and what went into the design, the materials? I have been speaking with your pickup maker. So if you can, talk about that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as thinking about Josh at Righteous Sound,
So let's just start there.
okay. My relationship with Josh started at Collings because he worked at Collings. We worked in the same room together. His background was at Warmoth Guitars, and he wound pickups also at Lawler for many years. And he came at Collings to work there in the setup room with us. And he, along with a lot of other folks during the pandemic, got laid off, unfortunately, from Collings. But it actually turned out to benefit him because he was already making pickups, but he now was doing it full time. His pickups are amazing. I had started purchasing pickups from him before when we were both still working at Collings, and he has an incredible sense of what kind of pickup will work with what kind of wood, what kind of body, for what kind of music. I have people constantly who are asking for recommendations about pickups. I have them call him, tell him about their rig and what guitar they're using and what kind of music they're playing, and he just zeroes in on what will be the most likely thing that they'll enjoy. And damned if he's not 100% correct 100% of the time. It's amazing. He's got an innate sense of it, and his products are just fantastic.
Yeah, I love working with pickup makers that can do that. Like you give them the recipe and they just go to town. The other part of what I love about Josh's work is how artistic it is.
Yeah,
I think he was one of the first pickup makers that just really blew my mind. Taking the same shapes that we're used to and working with that shape, that footprint, but like just going to town on the art side of it. And it just like it blows my mind. I love following his work on Instagram. Righteous Sound, right? Is that
righteous
his?
sound. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're not familiar, definitely check out his work. I just found out about him as I was putting on the show, and I was just like, whoa, I need to get some of those. Now I'm stuck on like colors and stuff like that, like what build am I going to put it in and what parameters and all this stuff. But, that's just me. Um, so I've talked to you about materials briefly in the past, and you mentioned Spanish cedar.
Mhm.
Um, what resonates with you about Spanish cedar?
Well, I picked up a bunch of it several years ago. It's a mahogany, and I already liked working with mahogany. I think it's a little, on average, a little lighter. Once it's nice and dry, it's great to work with. It cuts really well. It sands really well. It's very resonant. It stains great. It just feels good. It's a great tone wood.
How would you describe it tonally?
It sounds like mahogany,
Okay.
because essentially that's what it is. It's neither from Spain or a cedar. There's a lot of things in this world are improperly named for whatever reason. Yeah, it's great, and everything I've done with it to this point, I haven't had any regrets. Doesn't have any squirrely grain run out or anything. I haven't had any problems carving a neck where I hit some sort of awkward grain that wants to chunk out. It works great with routing. It's a very uh, accommodating wood to work with.
That's a very good description. And another builder that I interviewed recently, Chuck over at Sadie La Guitars, he's just in love with Spanish cedar. And so I remembered that you were using Spanish cedar. It's one of the woods that I used once and I'd like to give it another shot. I really like that airy, porous feel to it. Like it's super lightweight. I feel like I'm really attracted to those types of woods. It seems like a fast growing tree with how wide the grain lines are. Like that allows it to look really clean and neutral. And so it's something on my bucket list. Are you using it mainly for bodies or for necks as well?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. Right
Yeah.
on. And that's another thing, like, you see maple predominantly. People think that, oh, I need this super rigid wood for a neck. And, mahogany is fairly rubbery. And so I love to see these sort of alternate materials on builds. So you have some guitars behind you. This is your main model that you make, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Then that was, I guess, going back to the question you had asked earlier. Yeah, the main model is the J9, named after my wife. Her name's Janine, Janine, J9, like J and then nine.
Oh, that's very
And
sweet.
I named it the J9 because years ago I was on a recording where we weren't quite married yet, but I thanked my parents and I think my grandparents or something before I thanked her. It understandably upset her. So I knew that at some point I would have to redeem myself for that. Um, and so I thought, what better way to do that than to name my veritable baby after her,
Yeah, that's very
That tells
sweet.
me came about. So there's the J9 Sing, which is short for single cut, and the J9 Dub, double cut. And then the carve top is just the CT, carve top, J9 CT.
Oh, I see. So the second one is the carved top. And is that also Spanish cedar?
This one is a prototype. These three right here are prototypes. These two are production models. So this one is actually a carved maple, plain maple top, book matched, and then the body is redwood, and the neck is mahogany. It's kind of the whole forest. It was a prototype, it's the first carved top I did, and I just was just experimenting, and it turned out amazing. So I'm ever on the hunt for some old redwood to make another one with, because that was really fun to work with as well.
What are your parameters for that? Because I have a few chunks that I just unearthed in my pile. And what are your parameters? What are you looking for in thickness?
Oh, and thickness, inch and 3/4, probably less with the carved top. Originally, I was going to use that piece of redwood just for regular J9 Sing, but I thought, let's experiment here. But redwood with maple, man, it's incredible.
Wow. I would have never considered that. Like, this is one of the great things about doing these interviews is, getting these combos. How would you describe that combo?
It's warm but very defined. And of course, Josh's pickups has got a set of RAFs, humbuckers in it. I called him up and said, "This is what I'm building," and he said, "This is what you need." And sure enough,
Money. Very
yeah.
cool. I love the colors you have going on. Are those all stains?
No, these two are nitro. This is burgundy mist from Gracie's, and then this is I had an old can of Re-Ranch TV yellow that I had never used, and I was like, you know what, I can use this before it goes bad. It turned out fantastic. These are all three stained and then clear coat True Oil. I'm looking at it now, and it kind of looks like it's some sort of weird burst, but it's not. It's all one solid orange.
Ah, okay.
And that's a trans tint orange. It's trans tint black, and this one is I forget what this is, a gel foil stain, gray. I forget what the brand name of that oil is, but these are all True Oil clear coat over the top.
Right on. I'm not familiar with Gracie's.
They have a whole line of vintage to modern lacquer spray can colors. I've rattle canned guitars for the last 20 years, so I don't have a proper spray booth. So that's the way I do things. I've done it so much, I get a really good quality product out of it.
You certainly do. Having seen those guitars in person, do you have a certain approach to how you spray them?
Long, slow distance coats back and forth. The way I was trained to spray a gun. If you apply the same strategy you do spraying a gun with a rattle can, you get very similar results. It's all about taking your time, being patient.
Yeah, and I noticed that the colored guitars that you sprayed, the coating feels very thin as well. It's like you got enough to just get that color on there, and that
Yeah,
was it. Is
exactly.
that pretty close to how you do it?
Yeah, I don't like thick, heavy finishes. I like to see grain. I don't use grain filler. I like these guitars to wear with the player. You see old guitars that have been really loved and the paint wears. I love a nice, really well done relic, but I like guitars that are naturally played through even more. A thick, heavy coat of anything can kind of choke the resonance of a piece of wood. Even in my description on my website, these guitars have a thin finish and they will wear as you play them by design. And I don't really like shiny things either. I like a patina on things. I appreciate a decay and a more subtle approach to finish. Dull, lived with. Uh, I like anything in the world. I love old stuff. You know,
Yeah, stuff that's been loved for a while.
absolutely. I write
That's
down to
all good.
the tools my grandfather gave me. They're all worn out, not abused, just worn out and tastefully used, and that just speaks to me.
Yeah, sticking with the guitar, since we're on that subject, what scale lengths are you using and what have you settled on for a fingerboard radius?
So these are all 24 and 3/4. I've experimented with both 12 and 9.5. These are all 9.5 now is what I'm doing.
So it really is like a cross of Fender and Gibson.
Yeah, I
That's
love that rounder radius. The 9.5 is right on the cusp of dealing with setup issues with choke out bends, in the middle of the neck where a really tight radius, your 7 1/4 kind of things, you have to fight with the setup to get a guitar to perform without choking out in certain areas. And this is, I think, the tightest you can get without having to get creative with the setup.
Yeah, are you going to be bringing any new builds or any new models to the next show?
I really am working towards that. I don't have a Mallory that I consider mine. I have the prototypes, but I want to build one for myself to play with, and hope to get that done between now and then, and maybe one or two others. For years now, been designing and acquiring wood to build my version of a Ibanez RG, which is my favorite metal guitar. I'm in love with that model. I always have been. I didn't acquire my first one until about 5 years ago, and I've just become obsessed. So like I have to build my own version of that. So maybe I get one or two of those done, as well as a Telecaster, Mallory Telecaster version. I've done a neck for a guy. He commissioned a Tele neck a la Mallory. So that really kind of inspired me to continue on with my Tele build and make a Mallory Tele.
Wow, that's exciting. One of the other luthiers I interviewed, he said like something along the lines of like everybody wants a telly or everybody needs a telly or something like that. And I feel like that's like 98% true.
That's almost completely true across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how versatile that guitar is. And I have a model that I make based on a telly. I call it a Bulldog, and there's just something about it. Like, stepping back and looking at Leo's designs, like the plastic parts and, the plastic looking paint jobs, like they look like toys, but they've sort of like, set the industry designs. And it's interesting to see where players took them in the 80s with Super Strats,
Yeah.
and how that kind of clunky design became more aggressive, more pointy, more precise. And I mean, the RG is like legendary at this point.
Yeah.
That excites me to see what you're going to do with that, because I feel like by and large, most people just copy it. So how do you do something fresh with that? How do you do something fresh with the telly? Like these are questions that I have. If you look at my lineup of shapes, they're all inspired by something that I wanted, never had, or that I had for a while and was like, I want to have that guitar again, or I have an idea about how I could do this in my flavor. And so, like, that really excites me, especially, just seeing the one shape that you do on your website. I just feel like the logo, the design, they go together so well. It creates a style, and I would love to see how you incorporate your style into those familiar shapes.
I made the telly body about 2 years ago. And that's as far as I got because I've been so busy with other stuff. The whole time I was at Collings, I wanted Bill Collings passed on in a couple years after I was there, but the whole time I was there, I kept wanting to see what a Collings telly would be. And that never happened, still hasn't happened. But I always thought these folks have created a Les Paul killer. What would they do, with a telly? Being right in the middle of Texas, I mean, you got to make a telly. I imagine that someday they will, but yeah, I love seeing people's versions of existing guitars and what they do with them, what they add to them.
Sharing on that experience of seeing Collings unveil their electric line at the NAMM show, like a legit Les Paul killer, a super legit 335 killer. If I was ever going to buy any one of those guitars, having experienced Collings, I would go there first. Like the quality for a, what, medium-sized shop now, the quality is top notch. Like you could tell somebody really cared. It wasn't just like, oh, let's do an electric guitar in the fashion of, because we found some CAD files online. Like somebody really cared. And when you look at all of the fine details, the bindings, that was one thing that stuck out to me. But the balance, it's like, I feel like a lot of Gibsons are very unbalanced. And I mean, a lot of the main brands, they're very unbalanced. They're very not changed. They all have their sort of issues.
It's like you can boil it down to a classroom with one teacher and 10 students versus one teacher and 400 students. Individual attention that the guitars get at Collings versus Gibson. It's just a numbers thing. Good instruments come out of Gibson, but a whole bunch of crappy ones too as well. And no crappy guitars come out of Collings because they're not making as many. There are probably less people involved, and they were designed by a guy who was interested in design and functionality, very much the way Leo Fender was. He was an engineer, and how can we make this function really well? And Bill Collings took that to the next 10 levels of what can be done and why are we doing it this way? What makes this work? And the aesthetics and everything about it, not just does it look cool or does it just play cool? Let's put it all into this instrument.
That's a really great description. I was talking to one of the guys that worked with me at SCGC. I was training him to assemble bodies, and he was sharing with me after, like, I don't know, a couple weeks of us working together, and he kind of warmed up. He was like, the calling shop kind of feels like if Santa Cruz Guitar Company and Taylor had a baby. Uh, that's what it would be. And he kind of got into the nuances of that. And this is probably 10 years or more ago. So I'm sure all of that's changed. But I thought that was really amazing.
That's a very accurate description because Bob Taylor is a incredible engineer, and the way that those guitars are built is, I mean, they're engineering masterpieces, and they're really structurally solid, and everything that goes into them makes sense. The functionality, and then Santa Cruz are beautifully well built guitars that echo an era of classic American guitars, Gibsons and Martins. I have a client who has I forget what the Santa Cruz, their J45 is called, but it's a J45 Santa Cruz guitar, and every time he brings it in, I'm just like, oh, man, this thing is incredible.
Right on. So that kind of brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. I was writing a blog earlier. So we have a blog that goes along with the High Desert Luthiery, show website. And it's kind of about the goals I have with changing the paradigm around how people look at the music industry and the guitar industry. Looking at it as more of art than like just a tool. Learning to appreciate the luthiers as artists and people instead of like we're just mechanics. And you run a very well-known repair shop here in Albuquerque. Like right now, and I'm sure it fluctuates. What percentage of your time is spent in repair and building your guitars?
That's a great question. I would say 99% of my time is consumed by repairs, and 1%, if I'm lucky, I get to build. If a build is commissioned, then I definitely make more time to, schedule things out and get that done. Breaking into the guitar building community or the guitar industry it's you might as well try to be a Hollywood actor. It's hard. It's overwrought. There's so many people doing it. So I have no delusions of grandeur. I build what I like. That's what one of my instructors at Gallup School of Guitar Building and Luthiery in Big Rapids, Michigan, he said was the most sound advice I got was build what you really love and what you would play. And then the challenge is to find people who agree with you to buy your guitars. And I haven't, strayed from that. I don't want to build something I wouldn't play. I don't want to build something that aesthetically isn't me, because that's just like playing music that you don't like, or painting in a style you don't like, or any kind of art. At the end of the day, again, it's art. If it's not making you happy, then you're doing something wrong, and you're making art, and it should bring joy to you and others, and it shouldn't be a stress, and it shouldn't be wasted effort.
Very well said. Can you tell us more about Gallup? I went to Roberto Venn, and in this blog article I was writing, I was having all these feelings come up about my frustrations around the program. And it was more along the lines of like what was missing. And at the time, I was really young and I didn't have the understanding about things that I do now. And I wish one of the instructors, would have given me the advice that your instructor gave you, because that's certainly where I stand now. I don't really build anything that I don't plan on keeping.
Yeah.
And you have to want it more than I do. Can you share your experience at the Gallup School?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a defining moment of my life, and it propelled me forward to what I'm doing now. I had been doing guitar repair and building, kit tellies, strats, P basses, that kind of thing prior to that for about 12 years. So I went off to school having a pretty good set of knowledge and borderline career previous to that with guitars. But the moment I stepped across that threshold, the first day into that school, I decided to rid my mind of anything I thought I knew or had learned previously. I was just there to absorb everything they were going to tell me. That experience was amazing to see what things I had come to understand and ways of doing things, making a nut, for instance, setup, any of that stuff. How was it going to differ from what I already knew? And was just open to absorbing other methods. And that translated really well in being able to do that. And the whole experience was uh, luckily, I have a very supportive wife, and she let me go to school. I didn't work the entire time. I just went to school. It was 40 hours a week for 6 months, and I absorbed everything I could. I read everything I could. I just took every advantage I could of that experience, and it paid off because that's how I got the job at Collings. I was also interviewing for Bourgeois up in Maine, and it came down to those two, and I chose Collings, namely because they did multiple different instruments: electric guitars, acoustic guitars, mandolins, ukuleles. I thought that would be cool to work in a shop that did all those things. Bourgeois are amazing, but at the time just did flat tops, and I wanted to, of course, electric guitars were my thing. I was hoping to get involved in that, which I did. But having said that, I employed the same tactic when I stepped into Collings the first day. I said, they're going to have a different way of doing things. Forget everything, just go in, absorb everything. And as valuable as the Gallup experience was, and the massive amount of things I learned and could now apply, 5 years at Collings was a multitude more than that with what I learned and absorbed. It was an education after an education to the highest degree possible.
Very well said. In training people over at SCGC in the wood shop, a lot of the new hires had gone to Gallup, had gone to Roberto Van, Red Wing, some different programs, and like they'd come in and it would be kind of like shock, like looking at the shop setting, and would often have a hard time adjusting to that, like being willing to let go of, whatever practices they have. And for me, it was really the first guitar shop I'd walked into other than the Roberto Van one. So, the intake was like, all right, welcome. We're going to do this first week and we're going to see how it goes. And whatever you think leave it out there.
Yep.
Do your best to leave it out there and be open to what we're doing here. Every shop that you go into is going to be different. You might work out, you might be a really good fit, you might not. It's not personal. If
Yeah.
it's not for you, let me know. And we can go about sorting things out, sooner than later. It's very interesting to see every new person come in and the reaction to that. So that advice of, leave what you know at the door and be ready to learn again. Great advice, especially for all the new builders. So, is there any sort of repairs that you specialize in?
I love doing refrets. Setups are paramount for me. I love giving a guitar that's seemingly unplayable to someone or that they've given up on, and they bring it to me and I give it back to them, and now it's their favorite guitar. I love seeing that transition and being able to revive guitars. Some finished things, poly, nitro, people bring in guitars that have been dinged. That is not my favorite thing to do, but I make it happen. The broken headstocks, top cracks, lifting bridges, all of that stuff. Fret level. Of course, here in the high desert, we deal with a lot of dry guitars, and there's a lot of fret sprout. So I'm constantly dressing fret ends. That I enjoy the process of. I would say, for lack of a better word, everything.
Very cool. Getting back to the Gallup School, did you make any acoustic instruments while you were there?
Yeah, so the first 8 weeks we did a solid body electric, which was kind of a kit guitar. They had the bodies and the necks raw, but already CNC'd. So you did finish sanding and finish, set up, all the fretwork, everything. That same term we did a flat top from scratch. And then the second term of 8 weeks was fingerstyle flat top. And that whole 8 weeks was just dedicated to that guitar. And then the last 8 weeks was an arch top, start to finish, in 8 weeks.
Wow, that's impressive. Did you enjoy that process of working on those acoustic guitars?
Absolutely. I had done several kit builds, Warmoth and all parts type of builds. So I was familiar with how those things were constructed. Acoustic guitars were a mystery to me. I didn't really understand. I was really looking forward to figuring out what made them work. Why don't they just collapse on themselves with string pressure? And so, yeah, absolutely. And the second term, there were two options. You could build the fingerstyle acoustic, or you could do a set neck electric. And of course, I wanted to do a set neck electric. But everybody else in the class, and there were only 8 of us, the journeyman's section, the first 8 weeks, there were probably, I don't know, 16 students. And then you can stop there and then go on to what they call a master's program. And so half the class left, and it was just the 8 of us to go through the end of the program. And everyone chose the fingerstyle flat top except me. And so they convinced me to do the fingerstyle as well. They said, it's going to be easier on everyone if you just do a fingerstyle. And if you can build a fingerstyle acoustic, you can build a set neck electric. And so with that, they convinced me. And in hindsight, I would have liked to do the electric, but it would have been weird because I would have not been working with all the other students and in the process. And the cool thing about Gallup over Roberto Vin, and I had also researched Roberto Vin as a potential school, is that, and I didn't realize this until I was at Gallup, but everyone builds the same guitar. You have a great basis for comparison. If you're building the same guitar as the guy next to you, you can see, oh, he screwed that up. I'm not going to do that, or vice versa. Or you can, when you get to the end of the line and everybody's guitars are ready to be played, you can see what the nuances and differences were. And it's, get A-B things. Whereas, Roberto Vin, everyone designs their own thing, and where's the comparison there other than this one looks like this and this one looks like that. So I thought that was a neat way for them to do it. At the beginning, I was upset that I wasn't going to get to design my own guitar, which I thought was cool about Roberto Vin, but it ended up working really well.
Yeah, I feel like that's a very productive way to go about a program, especially when you want people to learn. And that ability to A/B things is so helpful. And also in getting people to get creative with a shape, a design, like limitations essentially, right? How
Yeah.
could you get creative with this? How can you like take your own spin, with this design, within these parameters? That's a great challenge. I really think that learning in a production-minded setting where everyone's doing the same thing, it's such great training, especially if you're sending people out into production shops.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that even though I learned a ton of stuff when I went to Collings, the training I received at Gallup prepared me for a very no nonsense working situation. The rudimentary skills of how to conduct yourself in a shop and what to be aware of safety wise and time saving wise. And that was all built in with that experience.
Do you see yourself getting back into any acoustic instruments in the future?
Probably not. And people ask me that. I've spent untold amounts of money outfitting my shop to build solid body electrics, and then to try to all the machinery and things I would need to do to build acoustics, not to mention dealing with the lack of humidity we have here. And, working with solid body electrics in a drier place is fine, because if they find themselves in a more moist part of the world, they're pretty good to go.
Yep.
Keeping something moist here while you're working on it, as I am inundated with repairs of acoustic guitars that are sans humidity. So building acoustic guitars here would be more of a struggle, I think, that it's worth. And I'm also, an electric guy. I have one personal acoustic that I keep in its case and keep it humidified, and very infrequently pull it out and play it. Poor thing. But it was one of my Gallup guitars that I built, and I love it. Don't see myself doing acoustic guitars. At one point, I wanted to do arch tops, but I don't really play any music either personally that would be played on an arch top. It'd be more, I love the aesthetics of arch tops, and what went into building the one I did at school was just an incredible. I mean, building an acoustic is one thing, building an arch top is a whole other set of just crazy methods and workarounds and things that you have to do. I don't think I ever want to do it again.
Where do you see your shop, your business in 2 years?
I would like to be building more, for sure. Again, no delusions of grandeur, but the more people order guitars or come in and buy ready to go guitars, the better. I already feel like a success having sold some of these. I never thought in my wildest dreams I would ever build a guitar that someone would be gigging with and recording with and enjoying. Building a piece of art that is used to make art for other people. It's just, I can hardly ever wrap my mind around it. So in 2 years, I would like to see that happening even more. The repair business is insane. It is nonstop. For every one guitar that leaves, a handful more walk in the door. There's no hiding from it or having a respite. So I think that'll probably just continue to get more and more busy, which is fine. It's not a bad problem to have at all.
Yeah, certainly not. I was talking with Jimmy Davini about that. I can relate in having a pretty, pretty big repair operation back in California, and that frustration around, oh my God, I'm also running a custom build shop. Like it feels like I'm running 3 shops right now. And
Yeah.
and like how do I, manage this? What do I really want to do? And when we moved out to New Mexico, it just all stopped. And I had gone from bitching about having too much work, like, and being frustrated about it, to like having 0 things going on. Being able to build more, just focus on finishing those projects I had started and stopped and started and stopped, finishing those projects and coming up with some new ideas and doing a few repairs here and there. It made me realize, like, wow, being inundated in repair is a great problem to have. I definitely relate to you in wanting to be able to build more in the future and sell. I don't think I could ever stop building instruments. Having a lack of business didn't. I just started making more stuff. I wasn't even concerned about having customers. It was just like, oh, I got this crazy idea. Let's go knock that out this week. And go about it that way. Do you have any local artists that you're working with?
Kyle Tuttle comes to mind. Then another gentleman by the name of Brandon Peralt. They're both Mallory artists, and yeah, that's it so far.
Do you have any socials, any website, anything you want to plug?
Absolutely. The website is malloryguitars.com, and the social, we got Instagram as @MalloryGuitars, and YouTube the same, @MalloryGuitars.
Fox, I appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing you at the next show. I hope that, for you and all the other participating vendors, we're able to get to that point where we're building more successfully, selling more pieces, getting in touch with more artists. And, thanks for your time again. You have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Barry.
Well, that was just my interview with Fox Fletcher of Mallory Guitars. I greatly appreciate him coming on the show and sharing more about himself, his builds, his build history, work history, all that stuff. I'll throw it out there again. Fox is a very respected repair guy, and he's got a shop here in Albuquerque over on Girard and Indian School. And you can find him via his socials and his website, malloryguitars.com. There are many talented repair guys here in Albuquerque, and he's one of them. And I wouldn't hesitate to ever contact him for help with that. He's also an amazing luthier. I hope you enjoyed the podcast as much as I did. And once again, I'm Perry from Unga Guitars. Got to wear the hat. Got to plug the hat. If you want a hat, contact me. We haven't put them up on the website, but they will be up there soon. Thank you for joining me on the High Desert Luthiery podcast. And for more information about the High Desert Luthiery Invitational, which is the poster up here, you can go to highdesertluthery.com. You can visit the YouTube channel, High Desert Luthiery Podcast, and please hit all the good buttons. Share the podcast with your friends. I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and thanks for joining me today, and I will see you in the next episode.